allows us to get the wisdom from parts that are outside our conscious awareness and have a calmer, more effective, healthier way of interacting with ourselves, others, and the world. IFS is a way for us to learn how to really hold, listen to, understand, and help our feelings, thoughts, and sensations. Internal family systems is a complex integration system. All parts are separate, but all parts are a whole. And IFS provides us with a way of actively relating to our system that is inclusive of all of our thoughts, feelings, and experiences. IFS provides an endless myriad of creative coping strategies, improving our inner toolkits from the strategies of moving on, distract, avoid, bury, shut out, etc. IFS includes a healing process and a way of developing relationships with our internal parts, allowing us to act in ways that are more responsive rather than reactive. IFS builds courage and confidence as we learn to lead ourselves. IFS provides a way for us to consciously lead our system and choose moment by moment who and how we want to be in the world. IFS can heal attachment wounding. IFS is a language, a compass, a way to navigate the inner world where no two systems are alike. The self-energy, self-essence is characterized by what IFS calls the 8 C's, which by this stage of the summer, I think you've all probably heard a fair bit about. Compassion, curiosity, clarity, creativity, calm, confidence, courage, and connectedness. There are also some secondary characteristics under I's and P's: innate, intelligent, intuitive, inspired, sense of inner peace and inherent worth, presence, patience, perspective, perseverance, and playfulness. My experience of self, both personally and in the therapy room, is that self holds an essence that is precious, an energy, a life force that resides in every cell and in every part of our system. It is undamaged and undamageable, and it knows how to heal. And I'm just going to leave this slide up while I discuss the connection between suicidal parts and self-energy. When working with suicidal clients, it is important to hold this knowledge as paramount. The knowing that self is conscious, wise, intelligent, and knows how to heal. That inside everyone is an energy that is undamaged and undamageable. When parts of the client feel terrified, it is important to remember and know this system has access to an undamaged and undamageable life energy that seeks for balance and healing and wants them to thrive. Accept that all parts have a positive intention, even if you and the client don't know what it is. Acknowledge that parts are always valid. There is a purpose and a reason they present, even if it feels unhelpful. Appreciate that parts were essential for survival and carry what the client was unable to carry at that time. When a client presents with suicidal parts, it is important to welcome these parts and let them know they are welcome. You can let the client know that you understand that this part or these parts are trying to help. And you can just do that by saying that, that you understand that these parts are trying to help. Can we explore that? If you can't feel truly welcoming, then you, as a therapist, take a moment to see if your parts will trust you to do the work by yourself. Step back and provide space. And if they will not, do not do IFS work with a suicidal client because your parts have been activated, which means your protectors are up. And protectors meet protectors with intensity that is not helpful for suicidal clients. In that case, follow your professional ethical structure. Be empathetic and understanding of the client's pain. Follow your normal processes. Consider a safety plan, suicidal assessments, and refer them on, and if necessary, send them to a hospital or other suicide support service. As you turn toward a suicidal part with your self-energy, hold awareness that there will be other parts that will be very worried about anyone including you and the client talking to the suicidal part. The suicidal part is dangerous. The suicidal part has real power and influence and has the power to push past other parts. Suicidal parts can be protectors of extreme, overwhelming pain. They can be exiles holding extreme pain that feels utterly terrifying for the system. They can be managers trying to manage extreme feelings and unprocessed experiences. And when dissociation or other big protectors can no longer hold back, manage, or hold the pain, suicidal parts are there. They feel utterly important and necessary. They feel they're doing the best thing for the system and for the people that the system loves. Be curious as to what they're concerned about, what they're holding, and what they know, and what they're trying to protect the client from. All parts are welcome here. It is important to ask the suicidal part how they feel about doing the job they do, and have compassion for the importance of the job they're doing and the weariness the part may feel. It is important for the therapist to be checking all the time. How curious am I? Do I feel curiosity in my body? How curious is the client towards their parts? How compassionate are they? How compassionate am I? How connected are they to the part, to themselves? How connected am I to my system, to their system? Accessing curiosity, compassion, and connectedness allows us to hold the space, the emotions, the fears. Hear the fears, the pain, and the concerns. To heal the pain, the attachment wounds, and create health as protectors regain a healthy role. Healed exiles experience wholeness and freedom, and healthy attachment forms between the client and their parts. Terror of the suicidal part is common. Protective parts, managers, and firefighters often forget that all parts have a positive intention. And, in fact, these parts can be sure the other parts do not have a positive intention. They only see the surface. Protective parts see the behavior of other parts and they make up motivations without actually knowing. They will tell the client that those parts are trying to hurt you, destroy you, undermine you. And those parts are allowed to have their perspective. We need to acknowledge that their perspective comes from their experience. Do not argue or fight with them, but ask them to tell you more. Be curious. When the motivations of the suicidal part and the protective parts are really known, the system understands and can relax a little. The common concerns are overwhelm, annihilation, shame, worthlessness, helplessness, abandonment, being alone, and death. Death is never the final concern though, so it's important to ask, so if you are dead, what will that mean for this part? What is it concerned you will feel or will happen to you if you are dead? Like, what is it concerned that you will feel or will happen to you if you are dead? The idea is that death is the solution, therefore, what is the problem? The suicidal part is using death as a strategy, but what is it the solution to? What is the part's fear behind the strategy? Go deeper. Sometimes the pain of death for others can come up, and this often leads to parts that are burdened and feel like a burden to others. It's important to welcome these parts. Welcome the parts that hold valid fears about overwhelming pain and being trapped and being lost and all sorts of terrible things that they know about. Welcome these parts. Welcome the parts that want to live fully, love deeply, and other parts that have their own experience of the suicidal part's behavior and are aware of how that affects the internal system, creating anxiety, overwhelm, disassociation, numbness, anger, etc. Always go deeper until the client fully understands the depth of the terrified part's concerns. There is no rush. Seeing, hearing, and knowing these parts is vital to the work. Usually this is really life-affirming work, as these parts are terrified, but they want to be fully alive, explore, and be fully expressive. Self is an internal energy that can hold the pain. And if not able to reach this, if the client's not able to reach this, it's important to explore if there is anyone or anywhere that feels safe to this part. It's important to let all parts know they're welcome, and we're not here to change anything immediately. And some parts hate that, and they can be acknowledged. But to start with, it's important to let the system know we are just finding out who's here and who needs help the most. Although the suicidal part is the target part, the terrified protectors who are growing bigger all the time to protect the system from this energy may be the ones you have to work with first. Although it feels counterintuitive, if they are understood and can relax, the suicidal part will too. This is the essence of what we hold when working with suicidal clients. When considering safety, it's important to remember that whatever the internal distress is, the suicidal part feels it cannot take one more drop of that distress and is very desperate for a way for the distress to end. This is valid and very real. Bring curiosity. What is going on in their system and in yours? Who is here and what do they need? Are you curious? If not, why not? Do not use IFS with a suicidal client if you cannot access clear compassion, curiosity, or self-energy. As I mentioned before, self has a quality of presence as well as the 8 C's. Presence in therapy is our ability to be fully engaged and attuned to the client in the moment. It's about being mindful, empathetic, and genuinely connected to the client's experience. When you are with your sense of presence and in self-energy, you have a really lovely, defined, therapeutic space that allows for deep understanding of the client's internal world. A safe environment is created where clients feel seen, heard, and understood, and are more likely to be open to allow exploration of the deeper, more vulnerable parts of themselves. This allows them to have the experience of parts being heard, relaxing, trusting them. It's a really beautiful experience. With the best of intentions, our parts as therapists can pressure, cajole, explain, plead, use subtle guilt and shame, and this can increase the pressure on the internal system and can be dangerous to all parts, pushing parts to extreme action. Parts-led IFS can be dangerous with suicidal clients, and also with any clients who are having big energies. As therapists, we also have fix-it parts, desperate to help parts, making plans parts, referring on parts, overwhelm parts, parts that collude with the client's parts. We can also have helpless and hopeless parts, guilty parts and anxious parts. And for us, it is important to notice them when they come up and see if they'll give us space. It's better to take a moment in the room to speak with and be with your own parts as a therapist than continue in a parts-led session. As a therapist, we also have parts that are terrified. What if the client leaves the session and commits suicide? What is that going to mean for us? What if we can't help? What if we make it worse? The therapist's concerns are valid and need to be acknowledged and held. And if these parts can't trust us as therapists to do the session, then we can let our therapist parts do suicidal assessments and create external safety for the client and for ourselves. And as therapists, we need to look inside and support our own system with self-energy, get good supervision and support, try to get space from our own terrified parts so we can hear their worries for us and support those parts to feel safe, giving them what they need. The therapist's concerns are valid and need to be acknowledged and held. It is appropriate to investigate if there is a current suicide plan, access to equipment, and have preparations been made. You can make assessments including information on the duration of the suicidal ideation, any history of previous attempts, and any recent help-seeking behaviours. Explore the client's safety and internal and external supports. It can be absolutely appropriate to provide numbers for hotlines, create safety plans, and refer to hospital. Self is like breathing or the circulatory system. It is an energy that if you are alive, it is there in the system. It's unconscious and runs without our awareness. It is seeking healing, seeking balance, seeking expression, and seeking understanding. You may not feel it, like darkness that has covered the candle until there is nothing but the dimmest light somewhere in the distance, but it is still there. When the suffocating darkness trusts you enough to recede, the light of self-essence has the space to expand. Self is both a part and an energy. As Richard Schwartz says, it is similar to the way that light is both a particle and a wave. It is undamaged and undamageable and knows how to heal. It is innate and intelligent. It is the source of all internal resourcing. The system, parts and self, currently need this suicidal part. Without it, the system knows something much more terrible would happen. The system knows a lot. It knows what it is holding. As the therapist, you don't know what the system is holding, and it is important to respect the system as it presents. It is okay to have a part that wants to end it. Although it is distasteful to many, externally and internally, the most important thing to know is that this is a valid option, and it is okay for the system to have that option on the table. Whether you personally agree or not, the system can make the choice to end its physical existence. As the therapist, you must accept that this is a choice the system can make. You can't fight with it. The system can choose how it wants to be in this world. When you invite the system to heal, to rest, and to transform, it usually likes the sound of that and most often is willing to try. And in the conversation, the parts realize that there's a new way they can be. If it's not willing to try, that is okay too. The system knows what is right for it, and you do not. You don't know the complexities of the life that this system is living, so approach respectfully with honor. You are a guest in the system. You can invite opportunities and offer transformation, but it is the system's choice on what they accept or are willing to do. Do it and don't do it parts get set up in conflict with each other as they see each other's behavior as undermining and against the way each one is trying to protect the system. This conflict is called a polarization, and most of you will know about a polarization. The essence of helping polarizations is getting each side to be fully heard with acceptance and acknowledgement, and using the client's self-energy as negotiator or negotiating space. The goal is to get them to understand each other. Once each part understands what the other part is trying to do and why, there is usually some space for them to work with each other in a new way. And when self-energy is there, the parts know that they are not alone. A suicidal part may want to end the pain. It may want to stop something, like feeling trapped or helpless. Its motivations may be something you've heard before, but you cannot know until you hear from the part what its motivations are. The motivations may be something you have never heard before and could never imagine. Each system is unique, each part is unique, each part has its own experience. The motivations are always valid and feel necessary to the part. They have to do this. So in targeting the suicidal part, we ask the client, where is the suicidal feeling in or around your body? How do you know it is there? What is it that you experience when it is active? What thoughts, sensations do you experience? If it is a thought, you can ask them to follow the thought. Can they follow the thought to where it lives? Where does it come from? Where does it originate from? Is it in the head? Is it in the body? Is it outside the body? If it is in the head, is it in the front of the head? Is it in the back of the head? Is it the top? So you can kind of get a sense of where this part actually is. What does it feel like? What images come to mind when you keep your attention on it? Can it feel your attention? How does it respond to your attention? If it is in the body, you can really get them to notice what it actually feels like without the labels of anxiety or sadness. What does it actually feel like? Get them to describe it and I get them to really dig into it. So if they say it's heavy, I ask the client, is it heavy like a bag of sand, heavy like water, heavy like bricks, heavy like a blanket? So really just trying to expand that sense of what is it actually like for them. If the part does not turn towards the client with a willingness to communicate, there is most likely a part in the way. As a therapist, you can ask, who else is here when you notice the suicidal part being activated? You can ask them what thoughts or feelings or behaviors come up when you start feeling the suicidal feeling or hearing the thoughts. So we're trying to explore, how does the system respond when it notices the suicidal part? And then you ask, how do you feel towards that part? That will let you know who is there. Is it self or other parts? And as you get to know the suicidal part and ask it questions about how it does its job and why, remember to encourage the client to send appreciation to it for the information that it gives and for helping the client to understand. Each thought, feeling, and behavioral urge responding to the suicidal part is usually a protective part that you can turn towards. This is an important step in building relationship between the client and the suicidal part. Each protective part gets to speak, each protective part gets to be heard, and each one gets an opportunity to accept the invitation to be helped. And also, parts have a right to say no and not now, and they'll think about it. Ask the system. Both the client system and yours will tell you what is happening. Interest is usually a protector, whereas curiosity is a quality of self. Feeling sorry for is usually a part, whereas compassion is a quality of self. Feeling close to or warm towards is often a part that wants to help, and whereas connection is a quality of self. If in doubt, ask the part. You can ask, are you a part? How are you trying to help? What are you worried about? What do you need the client to know or understand? A non-judgmental, safe therapeutic environment is developed with curiosity, connection, compassion, and the following tools. All parts are welcome. Without the inclusion of all parts, the system will not trust you or the client. You cannot expect to be able to tell some parts they're not welcome or have to change without other parts also getting worried that you will do that to them. All parts are welcome all the time. If parts will give you the space to work with the target part and try to help it, that's great. If they can't or won't, then you send your curiosity towards them. Extend the invitation to them to sit at the table with the client so they can really understand the concerns. Understanding all the concerns and motivations for each part is essential to relationship building and developing trust within the system to allow for self-leadership. So it's really about having a welcoming space for everybody to speak, for everybody to express, for everybody to talk about their concerns, for everybody to, in the system, who are all providing a really important function for the system to be able to be there. With suicidal clients in particular, the roles of each part is so important and vital that being asked to step back can feel dismissive and like you are trying to get rid of them. They believe they know what will happen if they're not there, and they believe it will be disastrous. So instead, turn towards the protective parts that are in the space. Ask them if they can relax a little, and ask the client to ask permission of the part to allow us to go toward the suicidal part to try to help it. If it's reluctant, metaphorically, sit down with it. Settle into a conversation with it about itself. Who is it? What is it trying to do? And what does it know? Ask parts, what would it be like for them if we were able to help the suicidal part? Invite them to think about what they would like to do if they didn't have to protect the system from the suicidal part in this way. Getting to know each part will help you to find the right way to support the system. The healing process. The healing process in IFS is going towards the young part or exile that is overwhelmed and or holds the pain. Hearing its story in its entirety from its own lips, and allowing self to be there for that vulnerable part and give it what it needed then and did not get. Offering it the opportunity to be supported to make that situation right for it and to have an advocate. Offering it a chance to unburden the beliefs and emotional burdens it took on at that time in the way that is right for them. Inviting it to bring in qualities to help it in the future. Inviting it to come out of where it is stuck if it would like that, so it doesn't have to continue to experience that space and time. And then there's an opportunity for transformation for protectors if they would like that. It is important sometimes to explain the healing process to parts so that they know what they're looking at. It's part of the invitation. This is what we're doing. This is what we're offering. Parts that are protecting against the suicidal part are usually exhausted and terrified, but they know their jobs and are very good at it. Validate their skills, validate their efforts, really respect them. Their skills can be the ability to get the client's attention, to be vigilant, to change or stop behaviors, to take the focus off of something and put it on something else. And those skills can be used in a different way and in a way the part may prefer. And sometimes the parts will show you some of their skills just by turning up. So as soon as you see them and get to know them, you have a sense of how they can help or what they use in order to do their job. So it's important to let them know help them sometimes to find out what these skills are that they use so that they can think about using these skills in a different way. Another important relationship building option is to ask the client if they can see when and how this part has helped them in the past. Because if they can see that, then they can send appreciation to the suicidal part for its protective efforts. The parts are often worried that if they stop doing this, the client won't need them anymore. So again, the validation of the fact they are welcome and not being told to leave is really important. And asking them what they would like to do if they didn't have to do this job in this way helps them to connect with their inner qualities. If they need to stay and watch, they can. If they need to step in, they can. If they need you to slow down, they can tell you and you will listen. They know the system better than you, and this is life or death. It's really important to respect them and respect what they do for the system. The client has managed to stay alive this whole time. The protectors have worked well. Do not underestimate them. Protectors in this system can be extreme firefighters, self-harm, drug abuse, depression, anger. And if you don't really welcome and hear them, they can be fierce towards the client. You are walking into a war zone. You are the negotiator, teaching the client system how to negotiate for itself. Your job is to listen, understand, and help the parts find the way through that is right for them. And in doing so, you're helping the client to understand how they can do that for themselves. You're helping the client build relationships with the parts, so conversations internally are not so hard the next time. The suicidal part is the target part, but the protectors surrounding it must often be worked with first. They have to be willing to hear and see the suicidal part be helped. Otherwise, stay with the protector and offer the healing process to the protector. It may not want to, but the protector will develop trust with the client through the conversation, through actually having that conversation with them. Do not tell parts they have to change in this process. Welcome them just as they are. You can ask the part if they would be interested in transformation, and if they're not, ask them why not. Follow their lead. Ask more until the client fully understands. This is actually really important because when you tell parts that they have to change, or you come with an energy of them needing to change, that's generally parts-led and they push back against it. But if you can just welcome them in the moment, just as they are, then you get some understanding, some movement, some flexibility, and then they start to be open to the possibilities. as you move towards suicidal parts. Know that they most likely have been told to go away, told they are hurting the system and putting the system at risk. They have often been bullied and shunned on the inside when they are just trying to help in the only way they know how. I genuinely hold so much compassion for these parts. These parts are fighters and have been working so hard, often under direct fire from other parts. Suicidal parts can be exiles carrying heavy burdens for a long time. They can be firefighters that come in when the system is self-destructing to help maintain life. They can be managers who manage other firefighters, such as dissociation, overwhelm, and other firefighters with a suicidal dialogue. They can be parts desperately driving the client towards help. Often, protective parts create what they most fear, and this is common with suicidal clients. And with suicidal parts. Often they don't realise why other parts are so worried about them, and they only see the help that they are trying to bring to the system. Bringing self to these parts helps your parts as a therapist and the client's part, both exiles and protectors, feel that they don't have to do all the work. Getting to know your parts who blend rather than letting self lead, and the client's parts that do the same, helps both systems to know that when suicidal parts turn up, they can be met by someone who can hold all of them. Keep the wisdom, heal the pain. Validate that the pain has taught the system something useful and important. Hear the part when it tells you how dangerous the pain is for the system. And remind them that they can keep the wisdom and heal the pain. Then they don't have to spend so much energy carrying the burden and can be free to do other things they would enjoy more. This is really important and really helpful when you tell the system it can keep the wisdom and heal the pain. It doesn't have to carry the burden. Most parts really like that. The depth of change that can occur when the client starts to understand and build a relationship with the suicidal part is really profound. Even if the healing work is not done, even if the system is afraid, when the client hears how the suicidal part is trying to help what it is afraid of and understands that the part is desperately trying to help them from a good place, and when the client experiences the effect of their attention, appreciation, compassion, curiosity, and understanding upon the suicidal part, the internal world just shifts. By remaining self-aware and grounded in self-energy, therapists can navigate the internal system skillfully, enhancing the therapeutic relationship and facilitating deeper healing for the client. Trust the client's system. Check for self-energy. Be welcoming. Listen to your own system, and if in doubt, ask the part. It's okay as therapists to stop for a minute and check in with yourself. It's better to take a moment and support yourself with your innate self-energy than continue parts-led. And I do this all the time in my sessions. I think it's really important. So I noticed when a part has come in, I notice when my feelings have changed, I notice when I have a concern, and I just take a moment and ask for space. And if I can't get space, then I just notice that and keep trying to ask generally. And normally I can actually give a moment and get some understanding of what that part's concern is, and then it will give me a bit of space. Regularly engage in self-reflection and self-care to maintain your ability to be present. Being with your own parts effectively allows you to be more attuned to the client. And that's also important before sessions and after sessions as well. Reach out for support for your parts who have valid concerns about the situation. Regular quality supervision can help in exploring challenges and provide strategies to enhance your skills, and can help you hold your concerns and help you explore what they mean for your system. When you can't find your self-energy, good supervision can help you access your self-essence and self-space again. And I also wanted to add to encourage you to look at the presentation from Jen Nield, the Using IFS Therapy Skills with Individuals and Families Caught Within the Cycle of Addiction. That has some really great aspects of working with firefighters that are very useful in this context, I think. And I'm ready for questions, Carmen.
Thank you, Katie. We do have some questions here, and I'd encourage anyone else who has any questions to put those into the Q&A now. Be really happy to respond to those with Katie now. I'll start with this first one. Katie, after how many sessions with the client do you see an integration of the suicide part into the client's self?
It's individual with each client. So normally once you start, well, from my perspective, once I start getting the interaction between the client and the protectors, and then their self-energy is there. So as soon as the self-energy is relating to the protectors, then you can actually move into those conversations that allow you to have space to integrate with the suicidal part. If the suicidal part is present, you can just, most initial sessions, I will get a conversation with the suicidal part. So, and then the integration happens very quickly. Like, so, but everybody's different. If they're highly defended and the system's very concerned, we may be spending a few sessions with the protectors.
Okay. Someone else asked if you can elaborate on a few examples of protective parts that come before the therapist actually gets access to the suicidal part.
Yeah, great question. Love that too. So you can have parts that are dissociative. So parts who will just take, as soon as you start going toward the suicidal part, the part will just take them out. And they'll have blankness, or they'll be somewhere else, or distractors. And you can have other parts who want them to stay as far away from the suicidal part as is possible. So especially dissociative parts who will just literally remove that person from the system, and their consciousness is not in that same space anymore. And then we turn toward that. So dissociative parts, angry parts who are frustrated about how this is impacting their function, can come in really quickly. Like, this part's destroying our lives. It makes it really hard. Like, you can have parts that are blank parts who are just like, I can't get in there, there's nothing here. Like, yes, the suicidal part, I can feel it, but I just can't see it, can't touch it, can't communicate with it. What else do we have? Generally, yeah, anxious parts who are worried that if we go towards it will overwhelm. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it sounds like there could be a lineup of
They
parts.
can be, yeah, they can
Yes,
line up, yeah.
thank you. Someone says here, I've seen a part forbid the suicide based on moral judgment
Yeah.
and an increase in pain resulted. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So parts can do that, and that's part of the vilifying approach that protective parts will have with the suicidal parts. So they become very stern. They feel they have to become bigger in order to deal with the suicidal part. So they become bigger and bigger and stronger and stronger. And again, this is when you would need to work with that forbidding part first. So you would need to really go toward that forbidding part and ask it, what is it concerned would happen to the client or to them, if what they would feel if it didn't forbid the suicidal client from having these parts. So, or the suicidal part from being there. So you really have to work with that forbidding part first. The forbidding part is like, this is unacceptable to have, but the suicidal part is, yes, but also one more drop of that pain is unacceptable to have. So the forbidding part needs to understand, well, okay, there is a helpful intent, and they both need to understand what each other's doing in order for them to relax and bring in the possibilities of transformation and change. But while the forbidding part is standing strong and basically guarding the suicidal part's effect on the system, you won't be able to work with the suicidal part, and there won't be any change. The system will be stuck in that polarity, really.
Right, thank you. Lovely comprehensive answer. Someone has asked an interesting question. Would you say that we all have a suicide part within us, that for a number it remains dormant until activated under certain conditions?
Yes, I was thinking about this last night. That's a great question too. I actually think all parts have the capacity for extreme roles, and they can all take that. They can all go to that point. It is one of the final cards in the systems deck, and which is why, again, I think it's important to have it as an option, to allow the system to have it on the table, because although we don't agree with it and we don't like it and it worries us, it is actually an option the system can take. So if we are in an extreme circumstance, we all may have that. For example, I know from my system, if I was in a concentration camp, my system would very likely have a suicidal part. So that's how I feel. So, and I'm aware that all of our parts can go to extreme ends both ways. And the ideal for an IFS and working with IFS and having a relationship with them helps them to stay on in a more balanced place where they can bring their naturally valuable qualities to you, rather than having to go on to the extreme end where their kind of options and possibilities are really narrow and really defined. But if they're in a balanced place, they have lots of opportunities and lots of flexibility, and there's lots of creativity and openness to doing things all sorts of different ways. But when they're in an extreme sense and they have to do extreme roles because of their either internal or external circumstances, all possibilities are there.
Okay. Next question, suicidal parts as exiles, ? Can you explain this a bit more and perhaps provide an example of what it might look like?
Yeah, so I think exiles can be parts, well, exiles are parts that hold what we weren't able to carry at the time. So they're holding the burdens, they're holding the belief systems, they're holding the pain. And so they can burst through the system and they can say, I can't do this anymore. I can't take any more of this. And they can bring up that suicidal thoughts, feelings, emotions, plans, because this part desperately needs healing and doesn't know and literally feels it cannot take one more drop of that same type of pain. And generally the way that we work as humans is that we do repeat situations and we repeat things that are not healed. So that little part is being impacted by the external world as well as the internal world, and it comes up as something that desperately needs it to stop. And for itself, the only way it can see doing that is suicide. So that's how exiles can be suicidal parts.
Great, thank you. Our next question, someone has asked, how can self-harming tendencies and suicidal behaviour be taken care of during the course of IFS therapy?
Self-harming is a little bit of a different space, because self-harming parts, from my experience, don't normally want to kill you, or they don't want to die, whereas suicidal parts do have a specific focus on ending life and that for its own reasons, whereas self-harming parts, in my experience, generally don't have that as their goal, and that's not what they're trying to do. And again, it's about really understanding and opening up the space. So with both suicidal and self-harming parts, you create a welcoming space, and you don't tell them they can't do this. You acknowledge the fact that they can do this, and often actually are, especially with self-harm. So they're doing it already. So telling them they can't do it is just, it shouldn't be in the space. So then you just hold the space. This is what you're doing. This is what you're feeling. Tell me more. Let me understand it. Let's get some understanding. Let's get some space in there so that you can really understand it. And when the client's system starts to really understand what the self-harm parts and what the suicidal parts are trying to do for them, they feel so different. And then when they send appreciation to the part and understanding to the part reacts. The part responds. It relaxes. It sends back appreciation for the client's understanding. So then the client's feeling a double whammy. They're feeling appreciation in their own system, and then they feel appreciation from the part that's appreciating. So it's a deepening of a different experience internally than they walked in that room with. When they walked in the room, they walked in with a feeling of frustration and anxiety and concern, and how do I manage this and what do I do? But all of a sudden in that session, they're feeling a sense of appreciation, and then they're feeling appreciation come from the part of them, and their whole system is having a different experience internally than they did 15-20 minutes ago. And that is the healing space. That's what they take out of the room and take home with them.
Wow. Wow. Great explanation. Someone else has asked, could you please explain the nuance of suicidal parts as manager versus firefighter and the difference between the two?
Yeah, so I guess, so really for me, there's not a lot of difference. Other people will have different perspectives, but for me, managers can go to extreme lengths very quickly. So for me, firefighters are extreme managers. They manage on a reactive level, not a proactive level. So, but managers can go from being proactive, trying to find situations, experiences in the past and making sure they don't ever happen again by doing A, B, and C. But they can very easily go to reactive. So they can go to, actually something's happened and now I'm going to try and fix that. So for me, firefighters are managers who have just gone to a little bit more of an extreme end of their role. And I've forgotten the question. Sorry, Carmen.
And I've moved it into the answered section. The nuances of manager versus firefighter and the difference between the two.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I think firefighters, generally are reactive, managers are proactive, but they can both do the same. And a firefighter once it is healed and once it has transformed, is very often something that's bringing qualities to your system that's really important, passion and integrity, and really still really big feelings, big energies, but they're not doing it in such an extreme way anymore, which is upsetting other parts and making other parts feel like they need to take action against the firefighter. So and I think, and managers generally are not quite so, like, they're still bringing organizational strategies to you and a lot of integrity as well, but they just do it in a little bit of a different way. So I hope that explains some of the nuances.
Thank you. This person asked a really interesting question, which I guess is relevant to Australia and other parts of the world that have assisted suicide now. Throughout most of Australia, we have assisted suicide is legal. The question is, how would you work with a client who is preparing for assisted suicide, and would you say all their parts are in harmony with the intent to end their life?
Yeah, well, that would be the goal. That I guess, like that, yeah, if that was what their system is ready to do and that's where they're at, the goal would definitely be to have everybody in harmony, everybody heard, everybody's needs met, everybody's wishes understood. I think that assisted suicide, yeah, that's part of, again, welcoming all parts to the table. Everybody's allowed to be here. This is something they can do. Let's bring as much self-energy to it as possible. And let's just really hold and be with, in such a lovely way, this choice that this system has decided to make for itself. Like, let's make sure everybody's on board. What are the concerns? Are there any worries? Let's really be with that. Yeah.
And another person has followed up with a question on that. Can you ever be absolutely sure the whole system is in agreement?
I don't know. I don't know is the short answer to that. But what I do know is that I trust self energy. And I know that if self is there, then that client will be acting in their best interests. Like, I trust it. Self knows how to heal. It knows these clients. It's absolutely intelligent, and it wants to express, and it wants to be whole. It has this just really big, lovely sense about it. So I trust that self energy, if it is there, will lead the system. If it can, it will lead.
Thank you, Katie. And just finally, any words of wisdom for a therapist who is morally, spiritually, or religiously opposed to suicide and finds themselves in a room with a client whose parts are in harmony with the intent to end their life?
Yeah, I would encourage them to see if they can get some space for that from those big parts. Like, I think that as a human being, you're allowed to have those things. You're allowed to hold them for yourself. You're allowed to have that sense that this is not okay for my system. But as a therapist, you have to allow somebody else's system to be what they are in the room. Like, nobody has the right to tell another system that has to be any other way. And no one has a right to tell you, as if you've got those beliefs, to be any other way. You can hold that, and then the other person can have their experience. And if you can't hold that person's experience, then that's not the work that you should be doing with that client.
Thank you. Wow. And what a profound way to end your session, Katie. Thank you so much for sharing all of your experience and expertise on this subject, one that I know is incredibly interesting and critical for all of us to understand better. So we really appreciate your contribution to the summit today. Thank you so much.
Thanks.